Good afternoon. Welcome to the Hudgens Center. My name is Kate Driscoll. I'm the curator here of exhibitions and collections, and I am really happy to present the work of Kent Ambler to you today. I've been following Kent's work for a few years. We've had it in the gift shop for, I want to say, around five years or so. And yeah, I think you're right. He has just been so inspirational to so many people who have come through here. And it's really introduced a lot of people to the idea of printmaking and changed their idea about what that is. So I'm going to hand the mic over to him, and I'm just really excited to hear and learn from Kent Ambler.
Hello, how are you doing? So I'm Kent. I've been a full-time artist for 28 years. I mainly work in block print, wood block print, and I paint with acrylic. This was such a big space to fill that I brought some paintings also. So anything under glass is a block print. Most of my subject matter is everyday life. You know, I have dogs and cats, and I live on 12 acres, and there's woods, and we have fox and coyote. So a long time ago, I decided, you know, when I was younger, trying to decide what my work was about, I found that the more I planned something, or the more I worked on a single idea, the less I became interested in it. And it seemed kind of like I got over it too quickly. So I heard advice that was given to a writer once, or in general to writers, and that is to write about what you know. And so that's what I do with my work. It's at my everyday life work. So, you know, like this one's up here's the view from my studio, and then one of my dogs is down in the corner. So that's basically the gist of my work. The block prints are all multi-block, so I carve a block for each color. And I'm trying to be kind of loose with it. It generally ends up a little tighter than I envisioned, but so I carve a block, I'll print it. Some of these, like over here, are just single block, just black ink. Some are up to 6 blocks, but I'm going for kind of loose, rough cut. And then the painting is kind of the same way. I try to approach the painting sort of loosely painted. I work the whole surface at once, and then I might do 5, 6, 10 paintings over that painting before it's done. It kind of all appears at once. I like the block prints because you're working on something that's going to make something else. So it's like this one step removed. So people tend to get, I think people that do, a lot of people I know tend to get tighter and tighter, because the more you control the plate that you're working on, it's a little easier to visualize how it might print. I generally use pine because I'm going for rough cut, so knots and splits and tears and things like that don't bother me. The inks, I use a lot of transparency, so to add another level of surprise, the way the ink looks mixed on the palette is not how it's going to look on the paper, because it's hard to determine. I mix things intuitively. I don't have recipes. So an ink may look very opaque on the palette, but it might be 80% transparent. You know, so then you start having 5, 6 blocks that you've carved, or that I've carved, and then mixing ink, and then it's layering ink. So the fun thing about block print is this reveal. So like one like this one had 4 blocks. So maybe 2 or 3 days to carve the blocks, another day to figure out the ink colors. And so you're 3 days into it before I finally get to. So that big reveal, the second, third day, is what I really like about block printing. I only print 20 or 30. I never reprint later because, like I said, the fun part is that big reveal. Printing old work would just be kind of boring. And, you know, if I wasn't making a living doing it, I'd probably only print 5 or 6. But because I'm in galleries and I go to festivals, I usually print 30. But so anything that's numbered That's it. There's no digital copies of anything. Some of the subject matter, like the birds, when I first moved to South Carolina 25 years ago, I lived in a house that had feeders on each window. So I could walk right up to the window and the birds wouldn't fly away. So I started getting interested in, their body shapes, their head shapes, the colors on them. And so that started to become kind of a theme in my work. So there's lots of birds, and then of course dogs would probably be dogs and the woods, those three things. I stay up late at night, so I do a lot of night scenes. I like to work late. And so when I'm working on something, ideas will maybe come up for another block print that'll lead to another one. Sometimes things just happen unexpectedly. This round one is off of a road near my house. There's a road called Jervy Road. And we had a bunch of trees come down, and so I saw this house that I'd never seen through the trees. So generally I work from sketches, but since I was out driving around, I just took my phone up really high and took a picture, and I worked from that picture. So things happen like that, just out of the blue sort of thing. So yeah, I'm not sure what else. You have questions or anything?
Yeah, open it up for questions.
Sure.
Okay, can you tell us from start to finish how you did that and how long it took?
That one, well, if you include printing 30, probably a couple weeks. So this one had 3 blocks. So when you're doing a block print, there's something called a key block, and that has all the info you need to make another block. So the black block in that piece would work as a black and white print, but it seemed a little sparse, it seemed a little empty. So I thought, well, I'll carve some color blocks for it. I saw Sarah's got there's some books, well, I was gonna say there's some books on a bench over here that show my process. You can grab one of those afterwards. But basically, so the first block I carve, I can take that and print it, and then take that wet print and then transfer that to another block. And then I can see how to carve the next block. It shows you in there. But so basically that had 3 blocks. To carve the blocks, to figure out the colors, and to print 30 took about 2 weeks on that one. So.
And would you be only working on that for 2 weeks, or would you?
Pretty much, yeah. Yeah, that's what, the editioning gets kind of boring, once I've seen it, because, 2-3 days into the process, I get to finally see the piece. And then I wake up the next day and I'm like, oh, I have to print 30 of these, which isn't a lot of fun. But the medium's meant to be editioned, right? You're making blocks, so it's meant to be printed, right? So to print 1 would be silly, so. Yeah, and with the other thing, people that make art find it interesting sometimes. I'd never thought about it much, but with the block prints, I use an oil-based ink, and my paintings are acrylic. So I'm impatient on the paintings. I want them to dry faster, so.
Do you let your ink, when you print one color, do you let that dry before you print the second?
No, I print wet on wet ink. Unless I get more than 6 layers, then I find that the 7th layer will try to resist. The ink won't physically print because it's got too much wetness. So yeah, but most of my block prints, I tend to do 3 to 4 blocks. It's just the way my brain solves these things, I guess. But.
So do you do it in the kind of Japanese ukiyo-e style where you print one complete, like you print light green and then dark green and then black, or do you do all the light greens and then?
Generally, I do it the first way, because if I was to print the first block 30 times and then the next block 30 times, I might wish that I'd printed the first block lighter or darker or a different color, So by printing each one complete, then I can look at it and say, maybe I'll tweak that a little before I print the rest of these, right? I also started doing something a little different. So I use a lot of tint base, which is transparency in the ink. And I found that, so ink prints differently on dry paper than it does on another layer of ink. So the first layer since I'm using woodblock, sometimes you can see nice fine grain or a little knot or something, but that's printed on dry paper, right? If I had printed it over a wet layer, some of that might just blur out and disappear. So I've started printing sometimes the black layer first, and then transparent colors over it. So like that one, I know I printed the black first, and then I printed the pink, and then the grayish blue color. So, so I don't know. There's it's kind of intuitive, so sometimes it's hard to answer questions. I'll have people come to the studio that are other printmakers, and they'll say, why are you doing that? And I'm unaware that I'm doing it. And now I'm aware that I'm doing it, and it ruins it. So,
I think the other thing that you do that makes yours, like you were talking about, you met that man and you said, your stuff looks a little like David Johnson. And you're like, oh, I studied with him. But you have a lot of different like handmade tools or something that somebody made for you.
Well,
asking your step-by-step process.
So
that's interesting.
So when you're carving the block, you have the general tools like a gouge or a chisel or a knife. I've made tools that to make marks. So anything that'll make a mark in the wood, especially with a soft wood like pine, is fair game. So I've made tools I've taken threaded bolts and welded handles to them so I could push the threads through the block, little pounce wheels, different things, anything that makes a mark, so.
Do you usually have a vision for how you want to present the piece? So you did round for that one and square for that. Do you think about that in advance, or is it kind of more?
No, it kind of happens. Like this one started out as a square, and I proofed it 3 or 4 times, and I was like, it doesn't, I think it would look better as a circle. So after the blocks have ink, I cleaned the blocks off on this one, and then cut them into circles, and then proofed it again and liked it better. So, but yeah, the other thing about printmaking is it's such a long process, is my first initial idea might get lost 2 days into it, and it ends up being a totally different print than what I thought it was going to be, and which makes it difficult because then technically I haven't really done that idea yet. So, but now it's like 3 weeks later, and it's like, do I really? But I've got new ideas. So a lot of things get lost in the process of, they just never happen, so. Did you have a question?
I was actually just going to ask how you got into printmaking. If you started with that, or
Okay, that's a good story. So I was always the kid in school that was drawing, and I had some art teachers say you should go to art school. So I did, and I went to Ball State, which is in Indiana, and I got there, and the whatever her title would be, administrator, chair, maybe it was a chair. She said, what's your major? I said, art. She said, no, you have to pick a medium. I was like, I guess drawing, because that's all I really knew as a kid, just drawing. She said, oh, that's great. We don't get a lot of drawing majors. So I start my first year, and about 6 months in, the painting professor got a hold of me, and she said, you should be a painting major. So I switched. Then the beginning of my second year, I took intro to print, and they started with woodblock print because it's kind of the most primitive. When you consider etching and lithography, all these technically complex processes, or more complex. Block prints probably, goes back probably the furthest. What you carve away doesn't print. It's pretty simple. So I took intro to print, and the class started with woodcuts. And so I carved my block, and the professor was like, okay, Kent's done, we're gonna print his block, everybody come up here. And I looked around, and everybody was not even started carving. I think they were hesitant to carve. Because going from a pencil drawing to a block print, it's a very different look, right? So we print my block, and everybody said, you've done this before? It's like, nope, I didn't even know about it. So anyway, it just kind of clicked. And then the way the school was set up, I was already along the too far into painting to switch my major. So basically I was a painting major, but I minored in print. And once you get out of school, you can do block print without a press. So you can print it by hand. So I kept making block prints, and so 28 years later. Actually, when I got out of school, I worked all kinds of odd jobs, but 5 years after I got out of school is when I started full time. So if you have questions on any, like there's a triptych down here at Boston, the Boston Terriers. Some of them have. So I work mostly from life. I go out and draw. I also work from memory. So, sorry, I got a little drink here. I had a step grandmother that raised Boston Terriers, and they had 13 all at once. And so, because she took them to shows, but after like 3 years old, she didn't show them, but she kept them. So you go to her house, and it's just pandemonium, these little Boston Terriers running everywhere. So some of the paintings are like from, or some of the pieces might be from memory. Some might just be my current view out of my studio, right? Obviously, we have a lot of fox on our property, but you're not gonna really get a chance to draw a fox in real life, So some of it's, I'll reference photos for some of the things. This one I actually drew from a taxidermied fox, but yeah. That's good. Okay, well, I'll be here if you have any questions, so.